You're fooling yourself. You think anyone's giving us a 2, 3, or a 4. We are either a 5 or a 1. We are a very polarizing show. If you sit through an episode, you either really like us or you got 5 minutes in and thought, that's the worst shit I ever heard in my life. I'm going to crush these guys in a review. That's
And
it.
I tend to agree. And I tend to agree with the people who think this is awful. Like, I've been trying to quit for months.
I like all of them. Anyone who crushes us and trolls us, I usually respond to them. Thank you very much. We agree. We suck.
The gambler's fallacy, basing your decisions on short-term data and recent information. The same reason why casinos will show you the last 20 rolls on a roulette wheel, even though it has zero impact on what the next roll will be. Frank and I dive into this psychological bias and all the little biases that come with it in this episode, which is fun for us to look at because we are both terrible gamblers, but relatively good at making decisions that involve gambles in the business world. We talk about how this applies to a career, investments, everything. And I am going to go with our standard disclaimer of these are just opinions of things that have worked for us. It is not financial advice. And if you are coming here for financial advice, you are in deep trouble. But we love you anyway. Thank you for being here.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God here.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie, you gambling fool.
Ian, you son of a bitch.
Brother,
Ian,
it is March Madness, and nothing brings out my competitive spirits like March Madness. How's your bracket doing, bro?
For those of you that are listening and not watching, Ian is also trying to emulate in his office the feel of a casino. If you've never stepped foot in the casino, it's a little bit darker. He's got mood light going. We're going to talk about gambling today. One of the things that Ian and I will tell you we're both great at, but if you've ever been to Las Vegas or a riverboat cruise, they do not build those things on the shrimp cocktail. They build them on jackasses like us that feel like we're going to get lucky.
Yeah, I took a chance. I took a little game of chance by buying these new ring lights for the podcast, and I think I got hosed. I don't think the ring lights are as good as I thought they'd be, but
they aren't.
Thanks for calling me out, Frank. Thanks for calling me out.
But keep sticking with them, bro. It's going to go black eventually. You're going to keep rolling those dice. Keep rolling those dice.
I'm gonna. So the topic of this episode is gambler's fallacy, and not that Frank and I are experts in any of this, but we are experts on the ass end of losing on bets on a regular basis. So a couple of quick stories. We are doing with our little fantasy football group, we are doing a March Madness bracket. And of course, I always fill out a bunch. Frank this year, because he is an unorganized dolt when he doesn't delegate things, forgot to put his bracket in.
Not completely true. I filled out the wrong bracket. I entered a different competition.
Filled out the Warren Buffett and win $1 million.
I put 4 brackets in that one. I just admitted to fill out yours.
So didn't put it in, but the other 3 guys that actually filled out their bracket and completed theirs for our gambling bet all went to Purdue University. And little known fact, Purdue has its highest ranked team going into the tournament that we've had in like 20 years. And none of the 3 of us have Purdue doing shit in this tournament, even though they've now won their first 2 rounds. And the reason is Purdue crapped out of the tournament in the first round last year. So the 3 Purdue fans have Purdue doing the same thing this year. And it's because we are heavily influenced by what we just saw recently. So our recency bias is kicking in. And I have a second awesome story about how cool I am. A good friend of mine sends me a text over the weekend. I'm in Florida with my son, enjoying a little boys.
Unders are killing it, Ian. Unders are killing it.
Little boys weekend with my son, should be enjoying the sun and spring training, and sends me a text saying, hey, unders have been incredibly hot in women's NCAA. And I should be able to ignore this at this. I'm 45 years old. I I'm not 22. I don't fall for these kind of schemes anymore, but hooked me in. I'm like, really? What do you like? What's going on today? Gives me some names of some other unders he's playing. I play 4 unders, bet $100 on all of them. 0 for 4. Every one of them hits the over. So gambler's fallacy crushed me on this. So the gambler's fallacy, which we're going to talk about today, Frankie, also known as Monte Carlo fallacy, which we should get to that at some point. You and I should make a trip to Monte Carlo and record live on the location, but we'll get to that later. So the fallacy is the human brain has difficulty understanding probability and large numbers. So you are naturally inclined to believe that past events can somehow change or impact future probabilities. So the gambler's fallacy, this is why if you go into a casino, a roulette table will always show the trailing 20 outcomes. If it's really random, the last 20 outcomes should have no bearing on the future, but by posting those numbers, they get more action because people are looking at trends. Either you have some people that are looking at, wow, it's been black 6 times in a row. I'm going to bet black. That's hot. And you also have the other side of it where people are saying it's been black 6 times in a row. No way it could be black again. I'm betting red. And that draws in gambling addicts like Frank and I, like honey to bees.
All true. And if you're going to bet the under, the best under you can possibly bet is still Joe Paterno. For those,
he killed it. He had a good 5-year run there where it was like, it didn't matter what Vegas set the number at, he was coming in under.
It was incredible. Him and Lou Holtz were the best 2 under bets in a long time. Like the women's tournament is hysterical, but it's like everybody thinks like they got an inside scoop on stuff, and you love to have it. The other thing about the
You're always looking for an edge. You're always looking for an edge. Any edge you can get.
For sure. The poorest I've ever felt my entire life was the one day I spent in Monte Carlo. Like I literally felt, I was like 25 or 6. I literally stood next to a Lotus and felt like what planet am I on? Because I do not belong here.
How were the casinos out there? Were they nice? Did you have to wear a suit and tie at every casino, or is that just like a couple and they market it?
I think it's a couple that they market. I mean, I assure you, I didn't have a suit or a tie at that point in my life, and I certainly hadn't had one packed.
Did you gamble, or were the tables too?
I walked through a casino, and it literally, my major takeaway from that event was, I would love to go back now. It was beautiful. It hung off the side of a cliff. It's a really small place, and I felt poor because it was so rich. But all of these things feed into. I mean, it all feeds into these things, and we all think we have an edge. We think we know something, and it capitalizes on emotion. And what I hope to accomplish in this kind of podcast today is it's not just gambling. With algorithms nowadays and with how smart businesses are, like YouTube is incredible at this. Amazon is great at this. Uber Eats is great at it. Like they show you like these trending things. You put your money on the roulette table. Amazon does that. You buy something, they use their algorithms, they put at the bottom and like, you might like this. It's all these breadcrumbs and trails that have not, like, it all plays into your psychology. And the biggest thing with psychology to me is every single person has a fear of missing out. And like, I was asking my 3-year-old son something over the weekend, and he picked his brother. Like, he's like, well, Manny. And they're like, no, it's you. But like every human being, even at the small age of like 3, it's inherent that it's not us, it's them. We're going to miss out. So you put the last 20 rolls up and you think, oh man, I've missed on that. This is the lucky moment. And it plays into this fallacy in your head. It's the reason why Vegas makes tons of money. It's the reason why casinos are popping up all over the world. And it's also, if you play it right, it can give you an unfair advantage against other people, and you can use it in the business world.
Yeah. And I think the illusion is really set on the past is an accurate predictor of the future. And right. To an extent, I believe that in some ways, right? The best way to look at a market is to go look at past markets that are similar. They can kind of teach you things. Having been through a couple of recessions, I think I'm a little more calm than I was in the first 2, because I sort of know how it's going to play out, how to expect it, with some warning signs. But I think the the big part of this illusion is most people just don't have, enough. They take these really small events and they try to extrapolate it into a straight line when really they just have a data point or two. They don't have the numbers and the math. So the math of the whole thing is if you flip a coin, the odds of a head or tail is 50%. And if I were to ask you the odds of flipping 5 heads in a row before I've flipped anything, it's about 1 in 32. It's about 3%, because that's really just 50% to the 5th power. But if I already know the first 4 flips, if I already know 4 flips have already occurred, and now you ask me the 5th toss, it's not 3% anymore because the first 4 are certainties. The 5th toss is back to 50%. And I think a lot of people think about streaks as a total combine instead of looking at the past doesn't matter. Right now, in this decision I have to make, what are the odds? So that's why roulette, it's a foolish game to look at what's happened in the past. That doesn't have anything to do with what's going to happen next. The same with the craps table that gets real loud and crowded and everyone rushes to the craps table. That's silly. The odds of a 7 have not changed. It's not loaded dice. They're moving the dice all over, but you see craps tables get incredibly busy because they hear some cheering. And so they assume, well, this table's rocking. So based on what's happened in the past, the odds of them hitting numbers are much higher. So I'm going to go to this table.
So I'm going to deviate slightly from the math and talk a little bit at kind of where we started with the gambler's fallacy. And the math is the math, but this all plays into human emotion. And I'm in the process of reading Ray Dalio's book, The Changing World Order. And what he explains in great detail in that book, it's a good book. And there's a 40-minute video that goes with it. And if you want to watch it, it's really, it's very interesting. But what he talks about is if you go back, kind of like one of Ian and mine's favorite books, This Time is Different, where he goes back, they go back 800 years. Dalio goes back between 500 and 600 years, and he talks about the changing world order. And it's happened multiple times. And Dalio argues that it's happening now. China is going to become the superpower. America's falling. Like, this is the argument, right? And he goes, we've never seen this. We haven't lived through it. Well, it usually happens about every 250 years. So none of us was alive. And this is how it goes. But what you do is you focus on what never happened during my lifetime. So it can't happen. But I've had conversations with people before and they're like, well, that's never happened before. Well, that's not good evidence. Just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And this comes back to the math. Well, it can't happen. It's improbable because it hasn't. Well, it just, maybe you haven't gone back far enough to research it, or just because it has happened doesn't mean it can't. So those are things that kind of come up over and over again with this is you're going to be more surprised if you think things can't happen just because you haven't seen them, or, you've rolled 7 sevens in a row. It's still a 50-50 chance for number 8.
I think so. I agree with all of this. So that, psychology plays such a big role. And I think what comes out of it is hope. You want to make sense. You can make sense of any group of numbers and try to convince yourself that there's a trend. And you can, you could take a baseball hitter. He could be in an 0 for 32 slump, and you show up to one game and you see him go 2 for 3. And if you just take that day, he's killing it. He's on an all-star tear and he's going to go off the next few weeks. But those could just be outliers in a longer trend that is downward. And it's called the representative heuristic, which is, it kind of states that people evaluate the probabilities of future events based on their own small sample sizes of experiences. And it's kind of the illusion of small sample sets. So I'll give you an example of this. So with Keep, with our car alarm company, we just rolled out this geo-targeting campaign. And geo-targeting just means you tell Facebook to only send it to people in a zip code, certain radius. So we picked 10 cities and I made an individual advertisement for each of the 10 cities. So it would say, hey, Detroit, are you sick of people messing with your car? Or what's up, Odessa, right? We just picked 10, not random, but cities that have high car theft. So we run it for a week. And in that week, 3 orders came in from Springfield, Missouri. No other city, first week, 3 orders right out of the gate. So I think we spent $50 in advertisements and got $600 in revenue from Springfield, Missouri, geo-targeted ads, 0 from the other 9. I get all hyped up, right? We hardly spent any money on any of
All
this.
right, Springfield.
That's exactly what I did. So
Yep.
illusion of small sample sets, right? So I'm like, something's going on in Springfield. Must be the ad. Maybe the ad really, I'm resonating with people in the Springfield, because it's like the advertisement is like me with a beanie on, like trying to break into a truck, and my voice. So I'm like, people in Springfield must like my voice. So I'm like, look, I tell our marketing firm, I want to go 10x the spend on it. Let's spend $600 this week on Springfield. You could probably guess what happened. We 10x the ad spend, got 0 more orders out of Springfield. It's now been 6 weeks since we've been running it. We have 10 different cities, and we have about 3 or 4 sales out of all 10. They just came at different times. So I got excited too early without letting enough data play out. And I went and spent like a drunken sailor, and that was silly, when really it was kind of resonating in all the cities. It's been an ROI positive campaign in general, but it wasn't anything specific about Springfield. It was a small sample set where we sort of got lucky, where a few of the first orders just happened to hit in Springfield. So it wasn't my thought that there was a clear path wasn't statistically significant.
So I remember the first time I came head to head with this, right? Like I was in my mid to high 20s. I was in the C-suite at the time. Like I walked in and the CEO of the company was there, and like I was an imposter at the moment. I hadn't made it to like a vice president's level. And I remember
at the bars with the ladies back then. You were
Right.
not an imposter at the bars.
I might have been there too, but in this scenario, we walk into, you know, the big, Ian used to work in that office. It's the big conference room. The CEO's there, the CFO is there, like the board's there, your division manager's there, and they tell you basically, because I'm a runt at this moment, don't say shit. Like just close your mouth, listen, and watch. And I remember the vice president who I worked for was very excited because they sold 2 luxury condos overlooking like the harbor in Washington, D.C. And the CEO looked at him and said, what if the market's only 2? And like our CEO was like, oh, no, or our vice president, like, oh, no way, it's only 2. Turns out the CEO is right. We sold 2 condos, and that was it.
You
That
saturated the market on the first day of sales.
That was it. There was 2 people with pent up demand. And then ultimately, I think we unraveled that community. We didn't even do it.
Wow. Wow.
But that's the story, right? Like we started off with guns blazing, 2 huge dollar sales. That was the market. And what you want to do is you want to see like, you know, is this market sustainable? And you realize it isn't, because you go into it with that same thing. You see this and do like, I knew it. And, you know, you did, but there's no sustainability to it. And I still remember that now, because it's like what it taught me at that very moment, Ian, was what do I believe to be true that isn't? Like I had never really thought to ask myself those questions. Like I'm positive of this, but are you? And like the first word that kind of came to mind, like later, like when I reflect on it, is split testing. Like you do that nowadays with the internet. You can do that with Springfield and Cleveland and selling your keep devices. It's really hard to do that with housing, but those are the things you can get to kind of give yourself more security, not be all in with something.
Yeah, 100%. So next for us, now that we've seen one ad has worked in all the cities, now we're going to run 3 different ads in each city. And we're going to see which one does best, which one performs best, which one gets most clicks, which one sells the most. So you're right, you split test, but you need a ton of data to do it. You can't, the illusion of small sample sets. So, you know, I'll use a different example that has nothing to do with sales, but it has everything to do with the startup. When we first started running ads on social media with our device, with our, the Night is the name of the car alarm. We ran some demo ads, and people in the comments early, the first when we start putting it out there, a few of the first people would say like, I don't want to give up my cup holder. You need something on the windshield. And like the first few people to say that, I was like, oh man, we got the anchoring location wrong. David and I are talking about like, do we need to get out and design that right away? Or someone would say something random about, the power charging, or that your key fob's too big, and all these things would overly influence us because we didn't have enough feedback. And now we've been running our ads for 2 months. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of comments. So now when I get one that's outside of the norm, it doesn't influence me anymore because I have a bigger sample set that I know the top 5 things people are bringing up. People want to talk about monitoring. They want to talk about what if a thief pulls it out and throws it out the window. I've now seen that so many times that I can stay with a high level of confidence that I shouldn't overreact to anything outside of that top 5 until we can solve for it. Like even today, you brought up the where we charge the power, and that's great feedback because I listen, but it hasn't been in my top 5 or 6 from customers. So I'm going to keep it in my head, but I'm not going to run and overreact to it just yet until I hear it from a lot of people. And I think that's everything with sample sets in business is you can't get too excited about a data point until you've seen it enough.
So we did an episode recently about the gig economy, and I was going to use a different example here, but I think I thought of a better one. So when you go and hire a virtual assistant, like if you use Upwork or Yelp, what do you look for, Ian? Like when you go to like any of those services, like what is the first thing you look for?
Their reviews.
And how many, right? Like how many stars and how many? So like when I go to use Upwork,
how much money have they made? How many review, and what are the reviews that people give them? And then I read the reviews.
So what I typically use, I use Upwork as like a sniper shot. I need to take care of something that I don't have someone on staff for, and I'm typically in a fucking rush. So with those things, I'm willing to slightly overpay for what something might be valued in the market, but I need accuracy and I need speed. So I use the opposite of a small sample set when I shop. I look for someone who has high star ratings and a lot of reviews. So like on Upwork, if you find someone who's got like well over 1,000 reviews, you found the pro. And you can find them depending on what you're looking for, but somewhere between 50 and like 250, and they're like nearly all 5s, like kind of our podcast, right? Like we have like 150 reviews, and there's like 5 or 6 people who rated us 4 5s, like 4 through 1, but mostly it's overwhelmingly a 5. It's the same way it is with people that you're shopping for. So what you can do in today's society is there's Google reviews, there's Yelp, there's all these things. And what you can say is it a small sample size? Am I taking a chance, or am I doing the opposite? And I'm kind of baking something in here. And I think in the decision-making matrix, are we going to sell 2 condos? Is it just 1 comment, or like, how do you get certainty?
You're fooling yourself. You think anyone's giving us a 2, 3, or a 4. We are either a 5 or a 1. We are a very polarizing show. If you sit through an episode, you either really like us or you got 5 minutes in and thought, that's the worst shit I ever heard in my life. I'm going to crush these guys in a review. I tend to agree with the people who think this is awful. Like I've been trying to quit for months. I like all of them. Anyone who crushes us and trolls us, I usually respond to them. Thank you very much. We agree. We suck. We should get better. If you want to crush us, please go to TikTok to crush us. We really have fun there. Yeah, no doubt. We definitely have fun there. So I think Frank, you're a good example of a real estate operator that you've now bought enough houses in Richmond, hundreds and hundreds of them, that you can say, okay, I know what works. I know what doesn't work. And when you see something that makes a lot more money than you assumed, you're smart enough to say, okay, that's an outlier. Something's going on in the market. I got lucky. You're smart enough to say I got lucky, and you don't run in and do 10. You don't do what I did with play the unders because someone else did it. If you go make it, you don't then go change your pro forma to everything is going to be that in the future. You're smart enough to kind of say, you know what? That's an above market win that we took, but I'm going to take some L's too if I try to base everything on my future on that. So I'm a human being. I'm susceptible to these things as well. But so I'm not perfect, and I make plenty of mistakes doing this. But the way my business model is set up is I vet every deal as 2 types of deals. So if I get a deal that comes in the door, and we've explained this before,
But if I get 123 Main Street under contract for a price, I vet it both ways. Could it become a rental or a fix and flip? Or could it become a wholesale? And in the old days, if I could make 50,000 bucks doing all the work and selling it, I would take 50% of that number now and just wholesale it. And now I can get 70 to 80% of that number without touching it because the market is so hot. And it's my job as the CEO of this company to remind people that that has nothing to do with us and everything to do with the broader market. And I need to stay humble in that. Now, I work with a ton of people. I interact with people who literally believe it's them that's causing this. And I believe that's a problem. I believe they have a turbulent road ahead if the market does change, and I think it will at some point. And I think these are the moments to be incredibly cautious and to realize it's not me. And Ian and I, one of our, favorite people who I'm going to mention a little bit later is Warren Buffett. He always says that when the streets, when people are greedy, be fearful. When people are fearful, be greedy. It's how you have to do this properly in your head. Like if they've rolled sevens in a row, they could roll an eighth, but they probably won't because that's kind of how math works. It's the same thing here. Like, am I just getting lucky or am I creating something different? And you need to be honest about that.
So 2018, over a 12-month period, I bought 3 industrial properties. These are big properties. They're multi-million-dollar properties, but they were the first 3 industrial properties I ever bought. Now I did a lot of homework on the ones I bought, but I was a novice at what I was doing, 100% novice. And all 3 have worked out incredibly well. I'm getting offers that are significantly higher than what I paid. There are a couple of them where I could more than double what I put in on the deal. Way better than I ever would have thought. Let me say that, like way faster. I was expecting to hold these for 10 years. And cap rates have gone from 7% to 4%, which means some of these properties have literally doubled in value. And I talk to Frank about this almost every other week. We're like, Frankie, do I need to sell? Because I'm not, this is one area where I am always very skeptical. And I think Warren Buffett is just always in my head, is if I'm getting called by realtors every week and they are giddy about trying to buy my properties, they are just so hungry to buy more and they think it's never going to end. I should start being fearful at this point. Like, this is the point where I'm starting to get nervous. Like, look, I'm not a 30-year commercial real estate investor. I'm a dude who bought some properties and they did really well. So I am on the gambler's fallacy would be, I'm good at this. I'm going to go buy 3 more. Let's go get 6 industrial properties and load up. And if I'm buying at the wrong time, it could wipe out all the profits I potentially have on paper with the first 3. Because all I know is I bought in a good market. I bought when prices were good, and I bought in a certain economy. But if I buy more next year, the market's different, prices are different, and the economy's different. So it's not the same thing. And it kind of reminds me of, you were just telling me a story last week, Frankie, about some friend who just sold a lending operation at an incredible premium. And it's enticing to think, hey, I could do that.
Yeah. So even
we talked about that. We were like, yeah, when did he buy it?
Even the most disciplined people and successful people, and Ian and I certainly think we're successful, or we wouldn't be doing this. But the point is, like, anybody can be lured in, anybody. And it's really important to have wise counsel. Like, Ian and I do this together, but we talk a lot. And I've got other friends that I bounce things off of. I have coaches I've talked to. You guys met Alistair on this podcast, who I believe in. Ian has a network of people he talks to, because every once in a while we're like, dude, crypto, holy shit, tech stocks. Like, we've all been lured to these things, penny stocks and flying private to Vegas. Like, there's all of these things you can be lured into. And what I've started to learn as I've gotten older is I'm going to get lured. I'm going to feel that emotional pull. But I also have something that's really good. I have something where I have a little bit of an advantage over many other people, because this is all I do, and I do it in a small window. So I feel that emotion. And maybe if you get to a point, it's like, I'll make a small investment in it. Like most of my stuff is in real estate. I invested in Keep, and I invested a significant amount of money into something that's a bit of a risk. Now, who are the people involved? I trust it. I believe in the product, but like that was the amount of money I wrote that check for in college was astronomical. But the point is, it's a bit of a hedge because I've done enough research and I have enough of my stuff in these places where it's like, this isn't just taking it to a casino and plopping it down. I'm putting it in something I believe in. There's something going on with it. But you do get these pulls, and it's the difference between getting pulled and pulling out your wallet and getting pulled and being like, interesting, let me step back and watch it.
But there's psychology behind it too, so Frank's talking about a lender that's making this huge premium. They sold it for a lot of money. Part of you is like, I could do that. Why am I not getting a piece of some of that? But the other point of it, when I talk to Frank, I'm like, okay, well, if you went and started it today, would you be underwriting and taking risk on of loans like they were 5 years ago? So in my opinion, just about every lender that was involved in real estate in the last 7 years made money. You would have to be really bad at lending to have lost money in a market that's been going up 15, 20% in price a year. You don't have anyone defaulting. No one's missing payments. No one's getting in trouble. Try running a lender when there's a recession and people are losing their jobs and home prices are dropping. Totally different story. So this is a great example of the gambler's fallacy of just because it worked for one person in a different market doesn't mean it's replicatable today in today's market. Now, there may come a time where the way I think you learn from that is you say, okay, when did they buy? Oh, they bought 3 years after a recession. That's the time to go start a lending operation, not 10 years into a massive bull market at the top. That's how you end up getting crushed.
So let's talk about something else for a minute. We're talking about the gambler's fallacy. Let's talk about gambling. When you pull up to a casino anywhere in the world, it's a pretty nice place. Now, the way it feels in the desert in Arizona, or the way that it feels in like Atlantic City is not as nice as when you pull up to Vegas. Like when you pull up to Vegas and you walk into the Bellagio, the air hits you, the smell hits you, like everything's incredible. Look around the floor. Most of the people gambling are men. They lure you in. It's an incredible place. You feel kind of invincible, right? Like you walk in, the carpet's nice. It makes you feel taller. What do they do when you get to the table? Is it a bunch of dudes who are servers? Absolutely not. It's mostly beautiful women because they're serving men. What do you get when you stand at a table in Vegas? Free booze. Because what free booze does is it lowers your ability to contemplate and think. So you walk into this incredible environment, you feel incredible. You're surrounded by beautiful people. You feel like an altered version of yourself, and they're going to lower your senses by giving you free booze. And then what you do is you chase, because you chase, and that's how you do it. Now, thankfully for people like Ian and me, we don't have problems with this. We don't have to go to Gamblers Anonymous or anything like that. For us, it's a bit of recreation. But if you get lured in the way Vegas lures you in business, in job decisions, and other pieces and other things in your life, what happens is you don't need the booze. You're doing it to yourself, and you're diluting your decision making. And what we're trying to say is the gambler's fallacy works in Vegas and it works in business, and it can give you something that you get lured into. Having strong counsel, being able to say, nope, I'm putting blinders on. I'm going to say no to this. It's harder to do it in Vegas, but the good thing is usually come with a couple bucks. And it's like, when I lose that, I'm gone. But you can really make big risks in business, and people do it because you get lured in to this process.
So, a lot of what we've been talking about is the emotional side of it. I think there's also a component of gambler's fallacy that is supernatural almost. The term for it is the just world hypothesis, which is a mistaken belief that some people have that chance is really a fair process that self-corrects. This is really, just world is just another way of saying people who believe in karma. The belief that
you're not saying juice world, right? Like just world, not juice world, the
not
rapper.
Juice world. No, it's the just world. No, not juice
just
world.
check it.
Yeah,
just
no.
check it.
Incredible
artist.
it's kind of the belief that people get what they deserve. If you believe that karma is there. So if you see something bad happen to someone, you immediately think, well, they had it coming to them, right? So these are people that say, what goes around comes around, chickens come home to roost, you reap what you sow. It's that karma, that it's a supernatural kind of belief that all things balance out. So if I'm on a bad streak of luck, my luck's coming. I'll have my day. Every dog has its day. And I think the problem with some of that is it takes away that growth mindset of ownership. It kind of just the universe is fair and everything will work itself out. And that's bullshit. If you're on a losing streak, work harder, go take control, go do things different, change your behaviors. If I see that the Detroit Lions haven't covered the spread in 5 weeks, they're not going to cover next week just because of the last 5 weeks. There is no just world. So if you're a Lions or a Dolphins fan, you know that just world is not true, because goddamn it, we'd have had a few playoff wins by now.
Right. I mean, you get what you sow, you get what's coming to you. The chickens come home to roost, whatever.
Curse of the Bambino.
Yes.
Bambino. How long did that curse go? Was it like 100 years?
86.
86 years. People in Boston believed that because we traded Babe Ruth, we'll never win a World Series. Right. And right. Theo Epstein was like, bullshit, we didn't have good enough players. I'm going to go use data and I'm going to bring in a better team, use Moneyball, and we're going to go win a few championships.
Right. And I live in the South, right? I live in Richmond, Virginia. It's the South. People often say I need to go prey on it. Like, it's part of the culture here. And you know, like, I remember working in sales in this market, and that was a big thing. Like, you know, especially people that came in on like the weekend, they're like, well, I'll talk to you on Monday. I got to go to church. I got to pray on it. That's cool if that's your decision-making process, but that doesn't solve the problem for you. It's like these other things. To me, it's part of a fallacy, and it's not going to get solved just because of diction and what you think. That's it.
And I think a lot of this stuff, Frank, is made worse or at least made more prevalent by social media. You know, in a world with influencers and people just being more accessible to talk to lots of people, you get into this hot hand fallacy, where you believe that someone that just had a little bit of run of luck is able to replicate that, and I need to listen to everything they say. That now become my spiritual mentor. That you went from rags. You know, everyone loves to tell their online rags to riches story. I was making nothing. I was living out of my car, and now I got this mansion. And it's this hot hand fallacy. And there was a study in 2010. They had people that had to make a choice between a series of investments, and they could either go with a risk-free alternative that didn't have a lot of upside, or they could choose an opinion from an expert, but it had higher upside and a potential for higher downside. So when the expert was correct, 78% of participants chose the expert's opinion again, as opposed to 57% when the expert was wrong. So people believing the hot hand, because they were right once, they have to be right the next time. And this is the oldest boiler room trick. So this is an old boiler room trick in Wall Street.
Before we get into the boiler room trick, let's just talk about how this manifests in the casino for a second. So the way, if you've ever played craps or you've ever played blackjack, what happens is I'll use craps. You have to establish a number in craps. So someone gets a dice and they throw a number out. If there's a crap, which you lose your money, but you keep the dice. But by and large, what happens, you establish a number. So you establish this number, let's just call it 5. So what happens is that person didn't crap out. So immediately you're like, good start. So then what you do is you reach to your stack of chips and you start loading up. You put money behind the 5 because he just threw a 5. So he's probably going to go throw another 5.
How many times have you heard me say, this guy crushes 5s? We got to get in on it. Frankie, get your odds on it. He crushes 5s.
Usually it's after our 33rd Bud Light Premium at the pool. And yeah, and then what you do is you lean into it, right? Because they just, like the study said, that's 78%. They just hit that number. They're going to hit it again. That's the emotion. And what happens is if you're a seasoned gambler, you're like, all right, I'll put a little bit of money out. I'll put a little bit of money out just to see if this guy gets this point. If they hit that point, that's when I'm usually like, all right, cool. The dice are going. And then invariably they crap
If they
out.
hit the point,
So
okay, so it's worth talking about. So that's the smart way to gamble. That's how I gamble when I'm sober or
Right.
sober-ish.
Yeah.
Really what you're talking about, I'm not going to load up the table until I've got my initial investment back. So
Right.
that's called playing with house money. So
That's right.
I'm going to put a little bet out there, a small one. I'll wager my money. And if I win it, now I'll take my winnings and I'll play with my winnings and take my initial investment off the table. And I think that concept of playing with house money, I think that applies in any investing. I think it implies also in a business. So you're like me. I like to, if I make some money with 5 on 4 group or with Keep, or if we get some revenue in, we're not just keeping all our revenue at Keep, we're piling it back into marketing because we want to grow market share. So in my view, we're using our first customers, revenue to fund the next group of customers we come in. We're playing with house money instead of, hey, that marketing campaign didn't work, so let's go do 10x what it was. We try to go pile money back into marketing campaigns that are working. We go use that house money to reinvest in the business. And I think it's the same with anything. You didn't take a salary for 7 or 8 years after starting Cava companies. You took any winnings you had and you hired more employees. You took out office space. You bought more real estate. You didn't pay yourself right away. You let the market reinvest in yourself.
And I think that's the smart way to do it. And the key scenario here that we're talking about is the difference between being sober and being not sober at a craps table. At a craps table, you think you can tackle the world, so you just go blindly. But the smart strategy is to start slow. But the numbers that you just talked about, Ian, bear out. Like in any scenario, I started to get more confidence when I started having wins in my business. So I knew I had a track record and I started to make more investments. Now, it's not like I didn't lose, but I had more of a track record. But when you're doing it blindly, just because something won doesn't mean it's going to continue to win. And I think that's where it gets into the boiler room scam, because it goes and plays into people's heads.
So here's the boiler room scam. And by the way, people still do this scam all the time. So you send out, let's say you send out 1,000 postcards. And 500 of the postcards say General Motors stock is going to go up in the next 30 days. The other 500 postcards say General Motors stock is going to go down in the next 30 days. We're sure of it. Send those out. In 30 days, you look at whether GM went up or down. Let's say it went up. I now throw out all the names of the people that I said it was going to go down because I have no credibility with that group. And I resend out the same people, those 500, I resend out a postcard, but now I split them 250 and 250. So now I take the ones that all think I was right once, and I do the same thing again, 50-50, half here that it's going to go down, half here it's going to go up. At the end of that time, 250 out of the initial 1,000 will have got 2 perfect predictions from me. Now I have someone call you on the phone and say, twice we told you exactly what was going to happen in the market. And we have the biggest investment yet. We just need a quick investment at $10,000 of your money, and we're going to put it in so-and-so. And now you believe this person is an expert because you believe that they sent that postcard to everyone without telling 2 different stories, telling 2 different lies. So it's a scam in that you never knew anything in the first place. You just purely played the coincidence that if I send this out twice, I will be right twice. I will be right twice a day. Kind of like a broken clock is right twice a day. That's that old idea. And now people feel very strongly like I'm talking to an expert with a hot hand. I need to invest in what they're saying, when really they just play chances. And it's a very, if you don't know the scam, it's incredibly compelling and hard to say no to, because you feel special, like you know an expert who has an edge that no one else has.
I mean, there's not really much I can add to that. It's unscrupulous in ways and it's brilliant in others. Because what you're doing is you're like, okay, I'll throw away 87.5% of the market to get 125 true believers. And how many true believers do you really need to make something happen? And it's a scam that's still used and works because it's incredibly effective.
And
because we're all susceptible to this. Huh?
Postcards are cheap. You could scale that up to 10,000, 100,000 postcards that went first. You can scale that scam, all the way up to 300 million Americans that you want to send it out to. So it's easy to fall into that. So crypto's been hot the last few years. So a friend who literally is telling you they put 1,000 into crypto and they made $25,000. That's really hard to resist the pull to say, I should get into crypto, because now a couple of things fall into that, Frank. One, you got the hot hand. You're talking to someone who is telling you, I am raking it in this investment area. And then you also have the just world where you're like, I'm a harder worker than this person. I think I'm smarter.
I deserve it.
I deserve it. They don't deserve it. They're not working as hard as me. They're not putting in. This isn't fair. Life's not fair that they made 25x their investment and I was left out. I'm getting in this because if this is a just world, my investment will also pay 25x. The problem is you are buying when the prices went up 25x. The odds of you doing what they did are incredibly low at this point, like incredibly low. Same people that bought GameStop, that bought all these meme stocks. You missed it, dude. It's not a just world. The only thing just that's going to happen is you just bought at the top and you're going to lose your ass. So you had to be very careful because a number of these biases all play into the gambler's fallacy in the same area.
So I'm going to come back to Nate Denton's dad in a minute. I'm going to continue the theme we're talking about here, right? So I see it all the time in real estate. We've talked here multiple times that I help run a mastermind, and we ask people questions like, is now a good time to do this? And the answer is a hard no. But there's not deals anywhere else. So people are chasing it. They're not being rational because they're thinking about what's being missed. Like right now, everybody's telling me the only reason real estate isn't going to fall is because of inventory. That's not a reason. Inventory can be adjusted pretty quickly if demand drops. If interest rates go up and demand drops very quickly, there's going to be a shitload of inventory, and that's not going to be your problem. It's not a driver. It's an effect of a driver.
It's a function of the economy,
right? So like you start to believe these things, and like I have made not a nickel on crypto. I haven't lost any money. I've avoided. I've watched it from the sidelines. Like I've watched and avoided Russian stocks or other things in the market who have risen incredibly well. Like most of the .com stocks in the 90s, I missed it. I did okay in real estate, but I missed those things. But the point I'm driving at with it is this: like, I remember in the 90s, there was commercials on TV about how easy it was to just pick something that was about to IPO and going to make money. Like they made fun of it on television commercials, and that market popped. I think I might have said it here. I don't have told Ian. Like I was on a playground with my kids, like, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, and crypto was at like Bitcoin was at 67,000. And the guy's like, I heard someone say on the playground, well, we all know it's going to 100. And like within days, it plummeted. It's like half of that value. So when it's a sure thing, that's usually the time it's not a sure thing. And when people like your plumbers or your cab driver are telling you now's a great time to buy stock, it's usually a great time to sell stock. There's a quote that Rockefeller has somewhere about when the man who's doing my shoe shine is telling me it's a good time for me to buy something, that's usually the moment where I sell it.
It's interesting, Frank. I don't even know if I ever told you this story. I was in Northern Virginia. This was like late 2005. I had just started with the company 6 months before, and something I had to go present at one of the Ryan Holmes meetings, and we were out at the bar afterward, and one of the sales reps, who I just kind of consider to be just a just a deplorable human. He was a drunk. He'd been married like 3 times, just terrible stories about things I just didn't like him at all. I didn't like being around him. It made me feel dirty. And he's talking at the bar about how he had just bought a model home like 9 months before, and he got it on like 100% financing model home. So pretty much didn't put anything down and flipped it for 100,000 already. And I remember thinking, like, I didn't have any respect for this person his values, his morals, and I thought he was dumb as a box of rocks too. But it really clicked in on me. Like, I was conflicted. Part of me was like, this is bullshit. Like, I'm working 16-hour days. I need to be buying investment properties. Like, that's the first side that clicks in. The other side clicks in of, if it's that easy for a dude like that to make 100 grand, something's too good to be true. This thing's going to blow up. And so I remember feeling very strongly when I came home that day about how conflicted I was. Do I buy a model home because I make more than this guy? I'm in a higher level position, so I should be in on these sweet deals. And the other side of me thinking, that's the dumbest idea you could have, Ian, just wait it out. But it's hard because when you see these things happen, it's not like the market fell apart the next week. It took 2 more years for it to fall apart. So this idiot probably flipped this thing 2 more times in the next year and a half, and I just sit and watch it. So it's easy to sit here and look back on those things and say that was really obvious. But I'd be lying if I said that. Part of me was thinking maybe I should be buying a model home.
So let's stay here for a minute. So I did buy a model home and I sold it. And I sold it in 2000 and I think 4 or 5. And I did that. I do remember people coming into my model because I was a salesman at the time and I was watching them make money. And I remember, like, I am missing out. And you got to realize, like, at this point in time, I'm somewhere between 25 and 27. I do not have a lot of money. Like $100,000 to me back then is it's probably more than my net worth.
And it's still it's still a lot of money. Like, it's still a lot of money.
It's a ton of money, but it was even more money when I had none.
That would have been everything. So, that would have been everything.
Right. Like that. Like $100,000 now moves the needle. 100,000 that back then was hitting the freaking lottery.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking about this, and this comes back to my dad. And I remember thinking, like, this just can't last. Like, this just doesn't seem sustainable. And I know myself well enough to know that I'm not maybe this goes back to one of our things where we were talking about just world. And my reality in the just world is I'm not a guy that gets lucky with flyers. And maybe I'm not a guy that gets lucky with flyers because I never took the flyer and I was always raised to be conservative. But I remember 2003 through 2005, there was a 2.5-year window where I watched that market tick and tick and tick and tick. And I saw this story 30, 40 times. So I'm pretty organized. I have 4,000 contacts in my Outlook. When I started my business in 2009, I went back and called 25 investors that I met in Northern Virginia that are all making $100,000 by buying a model home and flipping it. Not one of them hadn't filed bankruptcy or lost a house. Not one of them.
They were all out of the business.
I called every single one of them just to see if they were interested in buying some of the stuff that I had. And every single one of them had gone through a short sale or a foreclosure. And I was raised conservative the way Ian was raised. I was raised to realize, like, the hot hand fallacy, it's going to come down. Like, if you walk to the craps table, pretend you're going to lose the money you set down. And those were really good lessons that I was taught as a young kid because I didn't chase the .com bubble. I didn't chase the 2003 to 2005 bubble. I didn't chase crypto. I decided instead I'm going to take the slow and steady approach, and it's been something that's benefited me tremendously.
So there's another side to this, the opposite side, Frankie. When we led this off, we talked about how in roulette, some people bet black when they see 8 blacks in a row, and some people bet red. And it kind of depends on some of your upbringing a little bit, but some of it also is just kind of what emotional state of mind you're in. But there's the opposite of the hot hand fallacy is the disposition effect, which is we tend to sell winners and hold losers.
Yep. Sunk cost. We've talked about that a lot here. Sunk cost fallacy.
Sunk cost. So they did a group called Noah Stoffman Group did a study of retail investors from 1995 to 2008. And they found that investors were twice as likely to trade a stock, to sell a stock when it was up 18 to 22%, twice as likely to trade it, to sell it, than a stock that was down 18 to 22%. And so when you hear that on the front end, it's like, it seems silly. What you're doing is getting rid of your best performing assets and keeping your worst performing assets. And I think a lot of people, I think they come down to, they're more influenced by fear of loss than they are by gain. So people don't like to, they don't like to admit they made a mistake. So they double down. So you buy two stocks, one company's fortunes turn up, one's company's fortunes are not as good as you initially thought they were when you bought it. And so one's down 20%, one's up 20%. So you hold the one that's down 20% because your ego says you weren't wrong, you just timed it, terribly. So now that it's down, let's average. If I liked it at a $10 stock price, I love it at an $8 stock price. I'm going to buy more of it. I'm going to double down, and to buy more of it, I have to sell my winners. But the problem with that is winners tend to keep winning and losers tend to keep losing. And so the fallacy here is this disposition effect of all things must balance out. Life doesn't work that way. There is no fairness code. Some companies are just better than others. And sometimes you make a bad decision, and taking the loss and putting that back into your winner, that's the way Warren Buffett invests. When he has a loser, he gets out and he holds his winners forever.
So I'm gonna go a little deeper on this, and I'm gonna go in a slightly different direction. So we interviewed Alistair on this podcast, and then I have another business coach. His name is Daniel Marcos, and Daniel Marcos had a job and he went bankrupt in 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that. And he went to work for a guy who had access to, or had half a bill, like $500 million, a significant amount of money. And the guy told him, what we're going to do is when the market turns, we're going to buy the best stuff. We're going to buy winners. So what happens is this. Now, I'm a real estate investor. My best stuff has equity. My best stuff has low debt. My best stuff is in the best parts of town. When COVID happened and I panicked, I was afraid that I was going to go broke. And I talked to Ian about it. So what did I do? I sold a couple of my cherries. I sold it right off the bat just to make sure I didn't drown. And the reason for it is I could sell 3 or 4 houses and I could liquidate a significant amount of money. And they were all cherry. They were great. Or I could sell 30 and maybe get the same amount of cash. But selling 30 is hard. A lot of coordination, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving parts. So what my friend Daniel told me is someone knew that, hey, when the market turns, people will sell their best stuff first. They'll sell their winners. They'll sell those stocks that are winning because it's going to bail out all their lovable losers that they just can't get their arms away from and they want to hold on to. There's an emotional attachment to it somehow. And this person who had this, 500 million has taken that to being more than $4 billion in a 15-year period because they just kept sitting back and being patient. And Ian and I talked a minute ago we talked about before we hit record on Buffett. Buffett just made a huge purchase, an $11 billion purchase. He's always doing that. He's always buying things when others are fearful or there's something down on it. Like when Wells Fargo went through all the BS it went through several years ago, he invested more money. He didn't pull back because the fundamentals were strong. They just had piss poor management over a certain aspect of business. So these are things that if you see them, something else happens, Ian. You start to see these patterns and then you don't capitalize like the people who are fly-by-nighters that were buying model homes. You capitalize like people who are industrious, who end up in history books. And like, we don't have those kind of desires. Like we don't need to own islands, but it's the type of thing that if you do it properly 3 or 4 times in the history of your life, you can lead a pretty incredible life.
So I have a story here of doing something stupid. Have you ever heard of Lemonade Insurance?
Are they owned by Sunshine State Insurance? Because I know them too.
No, but we need to tell that story at some point. No, they are not owned by Sunshine State Insurance. That's for another episode.
Perhaps they're a subsidiary.
They're considerably higher tech than Sunshine State Insurance based on stories you've told of lore. So Lemonade is they're a tech company, but they're an insurance company. So they have an app that makes doing insurance really easy. The reason why they came into my world, I switched offices. So I moved from one executive suite to a bigger one that's a little closer to my house. I went from one that was 1.2 miles from my house to one that was 0.9 miles. I wanted an easier commute.
How often do you walk to work, Ian?
Commonsensical. You're getting a little too aggressive.
Never.
Too aggressive. Well, with gas getting higher, I might start riding my bike, save some cash. But anyway, Lemonade, I had to use them for renter's insurance. I had to get like office insurance to as part of my lease. So I found this, you download the app and it was the easiest insurance process I had ever gone through. I didn't have to call anyone, didn't talk to anyone. It was 5 minutes. I had renter's insurance like that on this app. I'm like, this is really cool. So it made me do some homework, and Lemonade, as a company, was growing unbelievable, leaps and bounds, new user growth, new lots of everything. So what did I do? I bought the stock. I bought it in kind of some increments, and it was going up quite a bit. So I ended up with like $100,000 in Lemonade. And I was excited. It was growing a lot. Like half of the investment had almost doubled. And so then the downturn hit and they started coming out with worse and worse quarterlies. And at first I started buying a little more. I got, my ego got involved. So the disposition effect. But it was an ugly down, the stock market's been crappy lately. And I had to ask myself, I was talking to my broker and he's like, what do you love so much about this company? I had to be honest with myself. I hadn't done shit for research on them. I'd read 5 or 6 articles. I looked at their quarterlies, but did I know them like I knew some of my winners that were holding up in this market? So now Lemonade's down like 70, 80%. So long story short, I lost like 30 some percent on that investment. I lost $35,000. And I thought, you know what? I'm out. I'm out. I'm taking that money and I'm putting it back into the same ones I always talk about: Google, Airbnb, Amazon, winners, big, strong companies with lots of cash, Microsoft. Put it back into winners. Even though those were down 10, 15%, not down 70, but there was a strong pull, Frankie, for me to say, man, it's down 70, 80%. What a deal. If I liked it back then, I had to be honest with myself. You didn't do much homework. You kind of bought it because you liked working with it. You got caught up in some euphoria because it was killing. But I just decided I'm going to sell this loser and I'm going to put it into really strong companies, even though they're not as perceived as good a deal, but I still think they're a good deal.
Is this where I should weigh in and say all of our investing advice is just opinion?
No, your standard disclaimer is there's probably something we should say about legal advice here. There's probably a disclosure of some kind we should make.
Harry Doyle said it best. You ain't the best color man in the business for nothing, folks.
Yeah, I am giving good advice here, which is don't buy a random insurance company that it's a high flying stock because you used it once for renter's insurance. Very stupid of me.
Alistair said this to us a couple weeks ago. He told us, you go have a great weekend with a date. You're like, let's buy a dog. We're all susceptible to this, right? We're all susceptible to these emotional highs, a good experience, and you allow that to let it color you.
Small sample sets.
Every single person on earth is gullible of this, but the best marketing and advertising companies are the ones who know how to capitalize on it the best.
So let's talk about, let's finish this up by talking about a few ways that this might impact a career. So common things that people say that are kind of tied to the gambler's fallacy, Frankie. So I'm due for a promotion. I'm due for a promotion. The question that Frank and I would ask is, says who? Who in your company thinks you're due? And are you so self-centered that you believe that the leaders in your company are just walking around saying, it's about time we give that person something? There's no one thinking about your career in the terms that you do. You might think it's been 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years since you've been promoted, so you're due. No one else is thinking about that. They're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about running a business. They're thinking about making money. And that no one has some running clock of when your career should make its next leap forward in a ladder. That's your job to go talk about it. There is no just world that says you get promoted because you've put your time in and you're due. If you think that way and someone else is going and asking for the promotion, they're getting the promotion, whether you were due or not.
So I know you and I have talked about this offline. I know someone who's fired within the last 6 months. And the first argument the person had is, you're firing me? I've been here for 21 years. That's like saying, wait a minute, you're arresting me for murder? I've done it 15 other times. I've never gotten arrested. Like, there's nothing to do with one thing has nothing to do with the other. You just hadn't gotten caught. So like there's no real justification for that. It's simply just, it's a trope. It's something you believe in and you want to believe in. So you say it, but it has no just effect or cause on what's coming.
Yeah, that's the idea of I've been here 20 years. That's the just world, right? This isn't fair. I've given 21 years of my life. That doesn't matter to any manager. What matters is if I have to cut my team, who are the people that I keep that will deliver the highest return? Because all I care about as a manager is, am I performing? Is my team getting results? Because if I don't perform, I will lose my job. Or if I'm the owner, if this team isn't good, I will lose all of my money.
So I'm gonna dive in this one for a second. I've been here 20 years. That's that's a feature. So what? And I've raised revenue 15% annually. I've beaten company projections for 20 straight years.
Mm-hmm.
I've added this. I've grown this. I've built this. I've helped with this. If you focus on the 20 years, you're going to find yourself on the back end of a barrel of a gun. The opposite is, if I focus on what am I doing to improve, to make better, I've lowered this by doing these things. I've worked on this. These are results. The feature is the so, and nobody cares about the so. The so what is the benefit? So when you talk about yourself, your career, you talk about promotion, focus on the so what. What's in it for them? Nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about me. I care about me. What people care about is themselves and the company. So if you focus on that and you get yourself trained to talk about the things you did to make the company better, that is when promotion follows. And that is when good things start to come in behind you.
Yeah, I've been here 20 years. And what that means to the company, I have a stronger network than everyone else. And that's why I routinely am in the top 5 in sales. And that's why I'm routinely running circles around everyone else in production, because my experience helps me get things done faster and more efficiently. And also, based on all that, you're also getting those results and you're getting a person you don't need to worry about leaving. I will stay and I will continue to deliver. Now you've turned, I'm due for a promotion. You're only due for a promotion if by you getting promoted, the company will do better. That's the only way you're due. You have to always tie it to performance. So
before we go off of this, I want to say one last thing. As a manager, don't get seduced by this person's been here for 20 years. Ian and I were in our high 20s and we were having a candid we were friends. We were kind of working together, but we weren't as tight as we are now. It's been a long time. But I remember I had a woman who reported to Ian who everyone loved. And she was a loan officer. She was great. And everyone was like, she's the best. Ian goes, no, I pulled her numbers. And she isn't. She's just friendly and nice. She's actually 5th. And I'm like, and I went back and looked at numbers. I was like, you're right. She is. So we all get seduced by these things, but there's someone behind you in a capitalistic world that's measuring. And that's why we talk about sabermetrics. It's why we talk about Moneyball. It's a fun way to talk through what really is happening is analysis. And those analysis is what's driving it. It's not that I've been here for X number of years. It's the other side of it is what's the production.
Another one that's comparable, Frankie, to I'm due for a promotion is when you hear people say, I like to let my work speak for itself. And maybe that works if you have a very conscientious boss who pays a lot of attention. So I'm a numbers guy. I'm into results. I'm into a lot of things, but you just made a very good argument for why this doesn't always work out. So let's say there's two loan officers there and they both want to get promoted. One is number one in results, one is fifth in results, but the one who's fifth in results is very friendly and friends with everyone and finds ways to kind of market herself much better than the person who's number one, who doesn't really show anyone. You guys had no idea that your favorite loan officer was actually kind of crappy when it came to customer service, capture rate, the things that we measured. And so if your approach is, I'm just going to let my work speak for itself, there's a good chance the person who's better at marketing is going to make more money than you, and they're going to get more opportunities because they are taking the time. I could have the best product in the world if I'm starting a company. If I spend nothing on marketing, what does it matter if no one ever finds out about it? What does it matter if we make a better car alarm, Frank, and we don't tell anyone about it? It's not, that alarm's not going to speak for itself in Atlanta. It's a bunch of plastic with components in it. Can't speak. We got to speak for it. We got to market it.
I'd love to add to this, but I'm going to let my work speak for itself.
You're very good at that. It's phenomenal.
I do want to say something further on this. This happens in interviews. If you work with someone in your company who's not as seasoned of an interviewer as you, and there's someone who comes across as polished or tells a better story, or this happens a lot. Someone worked with Home Investors, who's basically the only corporate franchise in our business. They have all the vocabulary. And these people come back and tell me, like, I want to hire this person. Why? Because they have a working vocabulary of what we do. Why did that person fail? With this much marketing spend, why were they only doing 20 deals a year? That's horseshit. On that marketing spend, they should have been doing 80. Like, why did that person end up, like, those are the things you have to dive into. So, like, we're talking about careers here. Don't be someone who's susceptible to saying, I deserve it because I deserve it. And if you're interviewing somebody, you're getting judged from top down. Interview people with what is the so what? What's the benefit? What are you bringing to the table? Do you want that person on your team because they make you feel good or because they can produce?
So, how about someone who says, I can't leave this company, even though I think it's a terrible environment, because I'm loyal? That would be the disposition effect. This is holding on to a loser. And it's also a little bit of sunk cost. So the idea is, I've waited this long, it has to get better. It has to turn around. I can't leave at its lowest point. But the truth is, it can get lower. So I left GE after 6 years. In the time I was there, the stock went from a high of $60 to it was maybe 40. It was down quite a bit. A lot of good people have left. I'd seen a lot of bad things happen. I could have taken the approach of, I can't leave while it's at its lowest. In the next 10 years, that stock went down to like 6. And I don't even know what GE is anymore. It's a shell of, it's not in the Dow Jones anymore. They split off so many businesses. There's only 2 core businesses. It's a small business that's still not going anywhere. And I'm talking about, it's been 20 years, Frankie, from when I was at the peak before Jack Welch left. And so this idea of, I need to be loyal, it's going to turn around. If it's been losing that long, it's probably not going to turn around. You might just be playing for a loser for a long time.
You and I have been talking about this a lot offline. I'm dealing with this with someone that I'm close with. And I'm going to stick around because I'm loyal. It smacks it to me, laziness. It smacks that I'm not willing to be uncomfortable for something better. It smacks that I'm going to just stay put because it's safe. And Google it. Like, there's tons of examples of like what Jim Carrey had talked about. His dad played it safe and got fired from the job he wanted to do because he played it safe. Like there's all these examples of those things, but that's what it comes back to is, I'm not willing to take the chance. And you're not using the right vocabulary around the real reason. You're not owning up to the real reason. You're loyal because you don't want to go out there and see what's going to happen because you're afraid. And that's what it comes down to.
And you know I think what's incredibly sad is, I bet 50 or 60% of people are like this. They only change jobs when they are absolutely forced into it. The disposition effect, where they hang on to a losing company or a losing career. And then one day they get laid off or they get fired or they have to move or something happens where they just can't work there anymore. They are completely forced out of it. A new manager comes in, forces them out of it. Then they peek their head up and look around, and there are opportunities everywhere that excite them. And they just wasted 10, 15 years of their life doing a job they thought was miserable because they thought they couldn't leave that company. They thought there was nothing else out there for them. When the truth is, it was there all along. They needed to be forced out of their comfort zone to go find something that was much more exciting. Yeah, I mean, the number of opportunities are just infinite for everyone, at every background, every college degree, every bit of experience. There's so much opportunity right now that you only need to kind of be forced into looking.
That's it. I mean, you and I are perfect examples of this. We had great jobs and we left for uncertain futures because we thought there was something else that would be better suited for us. And we found it. I mean, this podcast is clearly an example.
Clearly an example of our meteoric ascent into gig economy.
With your incredible palatial office where you use Lemonade for insurance.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. You should try it. It's a nice app. Very smooth. Very good UX and UI user experience.
Let's bring this thing home, brother.
So I think the big takeaways that I have just in delving down this rabbit hole with you is, before you make a decision, ask yourself, am I overly influenced by a small sample set of my own personal, experiences? Widen your lens, look at more data, look at more people. Ask yourself, is this decision, any decision could be a good decision if the right timing. So ask yourself, is my timing right? Is if I'm making a decision that I'm influenced by a previous decision, how much did timing play into that being a good decision, and how much is timing different now? I think those are two incredibly, look at more data, look at the timing of the data. And, instead of thinking it's a just world, if you're on a losing streak, or even if you're on a winning streak, ask yourself what behaviors are creating that losing streak, not what the universe is doing for you. There is no natural help coming to help you. It's, if you're losing, it's probably because your behaviors need a major change.
So do you have any idea what my summer is?
No.
I think it's time to go to Vegas.
Actually, all of that talk about gambling has made me want to go to Vegas again. Even though I just went to Vegas twice in the last 6 months. If you want to go to Vegas, I'll go to Vegas with you.
It's time.
And I'll fall for everything we just talked about today. And that's okay. That's okay.
Exactly.
That's okay. Hey, Frankie, you gambling fool. Great hanging out with you.
It's always good to see you, Ian.
See you, dude.
See ya.